Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Empower Hour brought to you by the Empower Plant by Facing Brooks. I'm Dana Brooks, and I'm joined today with my law partner, Kimmy Hogan. Welcome, Kimmy.
Hey, thank you so much.
Hey, and I've got Kia Thomas back. She is our PR director. Welcome back, Kia.
Hi.
And we have got an incredibly wonderful guest. So many of you probably know her or have at least heard of her. We've got Jana McConnaughhay today. So welcome, Jana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Just don't make anybody have to spell your last name. That's what I ask.
Yeah, I want you all to recite it for me by the end of this hour.
Because I can't spell it. I know how to do it, but luckily my phone recognizes it. I guess it's one of those words that's said enough that we can cough it up and have it spelled correctly, because I was dictating something about you earlier. But welcome back. We have so many mutual friends, all of us in the firm. You've got a pretty recognizable name around town. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you do, and how you got to be who you are now, an elder law attorney who helps people navigate some parts of their lives that are maybe a little more difficult and not so much common sense. So you help a lot of people. But tell us about you. What's your story?
Yep, I grew up here in Tallahassee, born at Tallahassee Memorial. Went to public schools, graduated from Leon High School, went up to South Carolina to Furman University for undergrad, then over to Nashville for law school at Vanderbilt. Started my practice in Nashville, then moved back to Tallahassee and did insurance defense work, which was fine. It was okay. But I felt a need to have a practice area where I actually felt like I was helping people and making a difference. And I felt like I needed a little more personal satisfaction from the work that I did with my days, which you guys probably get doing plaintiffs work. You get to work with individuals. So I know you know what I mean. But so I started doing pro bono work with guardianships for folks with developmental disabilities.
Oh.
And just slowly kind of started taking baby steps over to doing something different. And then about the time that my daughter was born, and she's 19 now, I decided to make the jump full time to doing elder law. And so that's morphed into a lot of estate planning, and started my own firm 15 years ago, I guess now. So there you go. There's the brief story.
Okay. Wonderful. I can't wait to delve into this, because when people hear the term elder law, they obviously think of older people, but I don't think they understand truly what all that encompasses and how it can be relevant to a lot of people in different life stages, not just older people.
Yeah.
Kimmy, I wanted to ask you, you're a lawyer and you deal with people who have experienced personal injuries. Sometimes we do need to deal with people who are involved in estates and estate plannings and that sort of thing. Now that we've got this expert available to us, what kind of questions are you thinking about? Because it's always been very vexing to me to practice in an area outside of kind of my very narrow, area. So I feel much gratitude whenever we bring people into our fold who are experts in things that we don't know. So what do you think of when you think of elder law and your experience as a personal injury lawyer?
Well, so the way that I mostly run into attorneys like Jana is when I represent folks for wrongful death cases, and we need to get our clients set up as the personal representative of the estate. And so they need to be designated as the personal representative of the estate by the court so that we can pursue a claim in their name in a lawsuit capacity. So that's usually whenever that happens, we call an estate attorney, an elder law attorney, and we have them handle that for us. But I have a lot of questions for you because at my age, I'm 36 years old, I'm married, I have 2 kids, I have a 3-year-old and an almost 6-year-old. And I know that I need estate planning documents because what happens if something happens to me? I know that Florida is a state where if you don't have anything, I believe all my assets transfer over to my husband. I would think, if I were, that's what I know from law school, is that right?
That's what you remember from studying for the bar exam.
That's exactly right. But, things can be more complicated than that. Certainly something could happen to me and my husband at the same time. And then what happens to our assets, who takes care of our kids? Jana, I'd love to have you talk about someone in my situation. What would you recommend? What type of estate planning documents should I have?
Yeah, with people your age, Kimmy, right, it's the kids that we care about, because you're right, if something happens to you or your husband individually, unlikely, but if it does, the assets will flow to your husband, either directly via beneficiary designations or co-ownership, or more complexly, if we need the complexity of an estate, eventually the assets will get to him. But the concern is not that the assets wouldn't get to your kids if something were to happen to you and your husband together, but that they would get to them at 18. And these beautiful children who you love and want to grow up to be productive members of society would get too much too soon.
Right.
You're going to have the guidance that you would have given them if you had still been around. So folks come in at that point in their lives, number one, to make sure we set up a good plan for the assets and the handling until you've got adult children who have the ability to handle what you've left them. And then two, to establish guardians. So you've got the right people raising the kids, and you don't have a fight amongst family members and perhaps the wrong family member ultimately having the guardianship duties. And I don't know about you, but it's funny, you start out thinking, well, these are the people I'd like my kids to go to. And then your kids are born, you see how other people are parenting, and then it changes wildly, dramatically. Like, oh God, no, not that. This is what I want. So anyway, it's good to have it in writing. It's helpful from lots of perspectives.
Well, another question I have.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I told you I had a lot of questions. Another question I have at being in the point of life where I am. So my in-laws are moving up to Tallahassee to come live closer to us, and they're getting up there in their age. And so I'm thinking, what things do we need to make sure that they have? And also, medically speaking, what happens if something happens to them and they would want us to make those medical decisions for them? What's kind of that checklist of what we need to make sure we're in a position to take care of them if we need to?
Yeah, that's right. And even for you, I mean, the lifetime documents like a power of attorney so that someone can make financial decisions for you would be important to have, like for your in-laws, if they were to lose capacity, or even if they didn't lose capacity, if they just wanted your assistance with their assets. And then healthcare directives. Without something in writing, Florida does have a hierarchy of the folks who can make healthcare decisions for us. So your husband would be someone who could make decisions for his parents if necessary, if there were no documents, but you would not be. Yeah. So to the extent your in-laws want you to be involved, putting that in writing is very important. And then there is no hierarchy for things like signing checks or signing contracts or making financial or fiduciary decisions. If you don't put that in writing, you end up in court in a guardianship to get those types of rights. So both are important for people your age, my age, a couple decades later, your in-laws, maybe even beyond that, because something could happen to any one of us. But for your in-laws, probably more compelling to get in and get that done.
And one thing that comes up sometimes, I'll have my clients call and they'll say, my family member is declining rapidly. I need to get a power of attorney signed so I can make decisions for them. And first of all, I go, I'm not an elder law attorney. I can't advise you on this. You need to talk to these folks. But can you talk about the importance of having these documents done ahead of time before you need them?
Yeah. You don't want capacity to be an issue.
Exactly. A lot of people, if you see a power of attorney that works in Florida, they are required to be very detailed. Every power that you want someone to exercise has to be in the body of the document. You have to initial several different places for it to be fully effective. And when people see that, it's scary because it's a really clear recitation of all of the powers that you're putting in someone else's hands. And under Florida law, it's effective the moment you sign it. So, my husband's my agent on my power of attorney. He could use it to go clean out our accounts and run away. He's not supposed to, but it's hard to unshoot a gun and take back what he's done. But the fact of the matter is, if I don't do it now, if my clients don't do it now, and then there's a loss of capacity, it's too late. So you have to get folks over that hump to sign it while, I think you were saying, Dana, while they've still got the capacity. And it's hard because a power of attorney, you have to have even more capacity than you need to sign a will under Florida law. So it's a really high level, it's a contractual level. So anyway, you got to catch people early.
I have a question on that. Do you litigate that when it comes up, or do you like send that to the trial lawyery type people? Because I would imagine that is a point of contention, capacity, did you know what you were doing at the time, that sort of thing. But I would also think it would be something that's disputed in a very highly temporal context. Like we can't drag this out for 6 months. We need a decision, and we need to go before a judge right now because they're about ready to do some end of life measure, or delete some account or deplete some account or something like that. How does that actually get fought about? That's what I mean when I say litigation to our non-lawyers people. That means somebody's throwing down and we're going to legally fight about it.
Yeah, I do not litigate those things. I am purely transactional. So I send it off to people who know courtrooms like you guys. But there are certain statutory sections that do allow you to run right into court if there's a possibility of exploitation occurring. There's emergency guardianships where you can lock down the person's assets. So there are absolutely remedies if there's a suspicion that somebody either is using a power of attorney that wasn't executed by somebody with capacity, or is misusing one that's a perfect power of attorney. And that certainly happens also.
I've got so many more questions, but I want to make sure, Kimmy, I'll circle back to you on some more of yours. Kia, what about you? You got a family. This is what people don't understand. This is not just for, people who have elderly people going on in their house. It's not, plus everybody does. Everybody's got somebody older person in their life. And it's not just for the uber rich. This is something that affects, and because I have a personal story of somebody tried to help, recently, and their whole family was turned upside down. It was the most gut-wrenching thing to watch these people experience the end of the last days of their loved one's life and having to fight tooth and nail with somebody over it. But have you had any experience with this, Kia? Or are you thinking, are your wheels turning like, oh my goodness, I better get my house in order before this happens to us?
Absolutely. I've had the experience with it in regards to when my grandmother passed. My mom kind of, in a sense, inherited a lot of things. And then it kind of makes me think about an inheritance backlash. And I'll go into that of what I mean. But, you start accumulating things that you're like, all right, now it's mine. But then she sits down and she's talking to her kids and she's like, don't sell my house or house it. Make sure that you guys hold on to this, whatever it is that needs to be done. So we're having those talks now. And I think it kind of takes me back to a couple of things where you see so many GoFundMe, when things happen to someone, because people aren't prepared and they forget to think about the life insurance. And then also, like Kimmy was saying, getting those documents in order. But those are a lot of things that the community, I know, is starting to put out there so that people understand you shouldn't be waiting for a GoFundMe. You have to be prepared. And I think you telling Jana, the world about, or, our public about what they need to do, I think it's great. It took me as a PR professional, it took me into risk management. And then I also went to that Netflix movie, I Care a Lot. I don't know.
Yes. Yep, I saw it. Yes.
We're all writing it down. I care a lot. I'm looking for a new show all the time.
Oh, I am not a religious person, but I was so happy about the ending. And then I immediately had to go and repent. I was like, Lord, please forgive me. So I think my biggest, I have plenty of questions. But the first question, going back to the inheritance backlash, And what I was meaning about that is kind of sort of when you have clients that come in to discuss with you about the split of inheritance or gifts from parents. I think when things aren't in order, you start wondering, do the parents really want to leave that type of legacy behind? Like, this is the last thing that happens, and now you have this split. When people come in to talk to you, do you talk to them about making sure that those things are in order, and or just advising our public, what should they need to be getting in order so they don't have that inheritance backlash of, this is my legacy, and now this one event is what I'm remembered by the whole family because I forgot to get everything in order.
Well,
or it could split the whole family based on a
Right.
decision, and nobody was prepared about it. I mean, I literally know people who, after they buried their mother, they will never talk again.
That's
Because
right.
of a decision she made that they were not aware of or prepared for, and it just totally divided a family. Yeah, that's a great question, Kia.
Yeah, it is a great question. Yes, we do talk about that. We talk a lot, Dana, you were mentioning a family who wasn't aware of what the matriarch was doing, it sounds like, with the assets. So we talk a lot about transparency. It's not always a good idea, and you certainly don't have to tell anyone what you're planning to do with your assets. That's your own business. And I'm a pretty strong believer in, your kids aren't entitled to anything necessarily. If you've raised them, you do what you want to with your assets, but we talk about transparency when that's prudent. And then we also talk a lot about, Kia, to your point, putting things in writing. We talk a lot about under Florida law, what busts up families, what I've seen, and there's nothing like the hate that siblings have for each other. I've never seen anything like it. And I love my siblings and we're good, but in this practice, holy moly, people will hold on to that, and they'll hold on to it. You got mama's skillet 20 years ago, and I was supposed to get that. I had to argue in open court over a skillet once. So that's true. But yeah, so we talk a lot about stuff. What are you going to do with your one wedding ring? What are you going to do with the family china? Although nobody wants the china anymore. And you can leave a list. If you've got a will, you can leave a list and say, my diamond ring to this person, my antique car to that person. And we talk a lot about, if you will do the hard work and make those decisions, people might be upset when you die, but they might not be upset with each other. They're upset with you and you're dead, so like give them that gift of making hard decisions so that they're not left with a fight and a mess because you weren't willing to make the hard calls during your lifetime. So,
it was funny when I was in law school, I considered family law, and somebody said the fastest way to get murdered as a lawyer is to practice family law. And they said, I'm not talking about divorce. I'm talking about get between two siblings fighting over something their mama.
Yes.
Those people will lose their minds. Those people will shoot up an office. Now, obviously that's hyperbole because you don't hear about it very much, but you know of which you speak about that. Those people, because it's not really the damn cast iron skillet.
Right.
It's a piece of her. It's every time we had Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I saw her cooking that, and I ate from that, and her mother gave it to her, and it's a legacy piece. It's not a damn cast iron skillet. But people make things have value that is not really rational. And so a lot of times, probably not sometimes, you're probably often dealing with very irrational wants, needs, demands. How do you handle that as a counselor, as a lawyer? How do you handle it whenever everybody's coming at you and you know what the person wanted, but they're fighting with you? I mean, do you ever get embroiled in that sort of thing, and how do you handle it?
I mean, it's hard. I wish I had a great answer to that. There's a lot of, I get conflicted out, a fair amount of times. If my client wanted something and the folks left behind want something else, you have to, the ethics of this practice, or, I know in insurance defense, not that I wasn't listening, but we had to check off the box for ethics, hours for CLEs. In this practice area, I mean, people do extra hours. You spend a lot of time documenting and thinking and consulting the ethics hotline. I don't know how often you guys have had to call that, but you guys
we call, I mean, not like every day at all, but you know, when we get into something that's not exactly what we do, and it usually is something like two people have an entitlement to a distribution or something. And so if they can't agree, you know, between themselves, who gets what, do we have to leave the whole thing? Are we conflicted out of the whole thing? It is sticky. And I really wish people understood how seriously lawyers take that.
right.
No one's going to give up their livelihood, their bar card to try to, you know, give one client 20 grand more than the other. That's not how it happens. People are pained. Lawyers are ethically pained to do the right thing, and they want to do the right thing. So many times it ends up costing more money because you do have to back away, and everybody has to go get their own attorneys if they want to fight it out, and it runs up the cost. And people then they get mad at the lawyers. Oh, you damn lawyers, you know, you're the reason why everything costs so much money. But it's not that. It's because we really are trying to be as ethical as we can and consider all points of view and make sure that we are not serving, you know, two or three masters.
Right.
I wanted to ask you something that has to do with online forms, you know, LegalZoom and this sort of thing. People wanting to download their powers of attorney, their wills, this sort of thing. This came up to me recently. Someone reached out to me and wanted me to help because they had a sibling who was in end of days, end stage organ failure. And another sibling had given up their entire, you know, career, livelihood to take care of the sibling and be their caregiver and everything. And the sibling had downloaded, the person who was in end stage had downloaded some documents expressing what they wanted done. They were not lawfully executed in accordance with Florida law. And at the 11th hour, this person's estranged spouse, they never got around to officially getting divorced, shows up and starts running the show. Says, no hospice, no hospital, don't let those other siblings have access to this person. I am still married to this person. There is nothing, there's no document saying otherwise. And I want them off life support. I want them, you know, I don't want them to be able to die in their home. I want them taken to a hospice house. Let's get this going. And so the family, they're like, listen, I don't understand what the problem is. It's very clear. He wrote down what he wants. And the problem was not, it didn't have any legal effect. And it was the most heartbreaking thing. And they were just, you know, they're in crisis. This is, you know, they're burning serious daylight, you know, valuable time they'll never get back. And they're having to spend so much of it talking to lawyers. And my heart broke for them.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, you know, that family in theory could have run into court, tried to get an emergency ruling, but I mean, that's a couple days wait time to get a hearing, and your loved one is dying. What are you spending time on?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hated that. What do you tell people who, well, here's the other thing too, is I'll hear this all the time because I had this experience. I wanted to go and get a will and all this kind of stuff done. And what I wanted done was one thing. But the lawyer started going, well, if you're going to do that, you need to do this. And it grew into this really big assignment for me. And I was like, man, and then I lost interest and I got busy. So now I have one heir because I'm single and I'm an only child. And I've got one daughter who's a grown woman, but I would not want her to have all of that because I know everybody else is going to come out of the woodworks for her.
Right.
They'll be like, oh, you came into some money, you know, and she doesn't have the life experience yet to be able to discern the good people versus the ones who are really trying to take advantage of her in a vulnerable state. But yeah, it got to be a really big assignment. So what I did, I just got a folder in my office that said, if I die, give this to Whitney.
Oh God.
It's like all the
You're one of those people.
Can't
talk to her.
At least we know now.
No, I'm ashamed. I'll probably.
But we're not talking about that, right?
It's just terrible because you're like, I just wanted, you know, to set this up. And then a prudent lawyer like yourself is going to say, well, you need to do this and you need to do this. And then the next thing you know, my mind's blown. What do you tell grown ass women like me who still want to come to you and take your advice? Scare me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the parade of horribles. I don't have to scare you, but I mean, I will say that we learned several years ago that the way to handle folks who are busy and get overwhelmed, I mean, you have like what decision overload. I was just reading an article today, like you make decisions all day, every day. God knows the last thing you need is a whole other set of decisions to be made and things to be done, which you really can't help if you're going to do it right. So our practice is once you've shown up, once you've come to that initial meeting, like we don't let you go. Like we set the next meeting while you're there. We set the meeting after that, and we do it for that exact, it's
like the mafia.
Yeah, it sucks to talk about dying. It sucks to talk about the parade of things. What if your daughter died before you? What would you do? You know, you have to talk through that. So once you've started, it's easier just to rip the Band-Aid and get it done with the promise that if you'll just stay with me, you don't have to think about this for years.
Yeah.
But
no, you got to do it. You got to engage that grown-up center of your brain that says, be a lawyer for yourself. You know, stop doing it only for other people, be a lawyer. Because I really would not want to burden my daughter with those sorts of things. And my parents, I love my parents, but their situation is not quite the same as mine, and they don't have the experience with dealing with a lot of the things that they would have to deal with if they were trying to plow through my estate.
Right.
So, you know, I do try to tell her, you know, don't put your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your money with one investor, you know, have a couple of lawyers.
Yes. Yeah.
She's like, thanks, Mom.
Well, one of the
real sagacious advice. I appreciate your wisdom. Let's see here. Kimmy or Kia, what do you want? I've got so many questions. I don't want to hog the time, but
well, and I had more
Kimmy,
to tell about
Kimmy, I think I cut you off.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So one thing that I'm thinking about while we're talking about elder law, in college, I took a course called Death and Dying. And so in that,
who names these courses?
Well, it was all about death.
There's
and
5
dying.
people in that class. 5 people.
It was jam-packed. Actually, people fought me in it. It was part of the nursing school.
Okay.
Not that I was doing nursing, but you could take it as an elective.
Yeah.
And they have you go through and, you know, visualize your funeral, and you kind of make a packet of what you'd like if you died. And I thought that was so interesting. And I've been meaning to get around to doing that again, because I think, you know, if my husband suddenly died, I would want to know how he would want to be celebrated.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't, in my grief, I wouldn't want to forget something, or, you know, does he want to be cremated? Does he want to be in the ground? Does he want to have a religious ceremony? Does he want me to do whatever, you know? And to have something in his own writing, maybe that directs me, would be really helpful and comforting at that time. So I was just thinking about that as we discuss. Jana, is that something that you talk with your clients about, making a funeral plan?
Yeah, you know, a lot of them will do, you're way too young to know this, but you can prepay your burial or your cremation. And so a lot of my, you know, like retirement age clients and on go ahead and take care of that so that their kids don't have to deal with that when they've passed away. But what you're talking about, giving detail about a service, beautiful, so nice. What a nice gift to leave for somebody. And then the other thing I would say is maybe put in writing or long discussions about kind of what you each want for yourselves health wise and with like your in-laws, because your job is, if you take on the job of being a surrogate for your husband or for your in-laws, your job is to put yourself in their shoes. What would they have wanted in this situation? And the more you talk about those things, the more you can feel like you're honoring your in-laws. You know, if you're like, well, they always told me that if this happened, they would not want extraordinary measures to be kept alive. Instead of killing my in-laws, I'm honoring them. You know, it's another real gift everyone can give each other, to be really clear about what it is you want for yourself. And then you've given them peace, you know, in doing that for you.
I love that. And I like that you call it a gift. I'm thinking Christmas presents this year. We're all going to estate planners.
That's nowhere near as fun as giving everybody a 23andMe DNA kit at Christmas.
Oh.
Although that can lead to things, probably a lot of elder law issues. Have you ever had that happen, Jana, where someone all of a sudden goes, I got a sibling out there somewhere?
Yeah, I just had to revise a will to exclude a purported sibling. And funky case, but a guy died of COVID in the last 2 years. And right after he died, a daughter popped up. She had found him through 23andMe, but the widow, who is not the mother, I mean, she would have known there was a child out there, has taken that young woman under her wings and just put her in her will.
What a lovely person.
Lovely. She's a lovely person. He never had children that he knew of during his lifetime, nor did she. So they have this beautiful relationship because of that genetic
How
test.
lovely. That's a good ending. That's a good ending to a 23andMe surprise. You don't
Yeah.
always hear those. Those
Yeah.
don't show up on Netflix at 2 a.m. when I'm looking around. The ones I see at 2 a.m. at Netflix, that is someone real south.
Yeah.
Right.
Ancestry.com ruined somebody's life.
Yes, absolutely.
Kia, what are you thinking about?
Probably something that a lot of people out there are thinking about is how do you avoid estate taxes?
Well,
Yeah,
that,
I want to know about that. How do you manage that? And then what is this thing about, like, you can give away so much money while you're alive per year? Tell us all about money,
okay.
tax evasion of your money.
Right.
Okay, yeah, not evasion, just knowledge. Yeah, so right now, everybody can leave, each individual can leave a little over $12 million in assets and not have estate taxes assessed. So, you know, the great majority of people don't have to consider that. The number is going to drop at the end of 2025, and then it'll still be about $6 million per person. So if you're looking at a married couple, you know, double that. So estate taxes aren't a huge deal for a lot of people, but are for some. And we need to, and we're starting with some of like my higher net worth folks. We're having to start planning for 2025, flipping to 2026 because it'll be reduced. But and then gifting, you can gift a certain amount each year to as many individuals as you want, and the amount this year is $16,000 without having to report that to anybody. So Dana, you could give gifts to everybody at your office of $16,000, and you
Good.
don't.
I was hoping I could do that.
Just wanted to let you know.
Go, Dana.
So yeah, so without having to report any of those gifts, and once you give gifts in excess of that amount, I mean, this is all very general rules, but generally you have to report gifts larger than that to the IRS. And then that will, what that does is it reduces the amount you can leave at the end of your life. So the gifting exemption amount and the estate tax exemption amount are tied. So if you gift $100,000 to every member of your staff, you just have to tell the IRS that you did it. No taxes, but it is going to reduce the amount. And again, this is all loose. Don't take this to the bank. Talk to your CPA, etc. But generally, that reduces the amount you can leave estate tax free at the end of your life.
Now, what is your estate for purposes of it being taxable? I would assume that's your, is that the amount of money after you liquidate things? What if you keep something in its current structure, either a holding, real estate, whatever, and you don't turn it into cash? How does that work? Is it only things once they become cash, or is it just the value of whatever asset?
It's basically, again, this is super, super broad in general, but basically everything you have dominion over and when you die. So certain types of trusts you aren't considered to have dominion over, certain types you are, certain types of entities get discounts because they're restricted and how you can use them. But basically, yeah, it's not just cash, it's every asset has to be valued on your date of death, basically.
Gotcha. Anybody else got some questions before I start hogging this?
So how would it, because you have so many people that don't go into doing estate planning because they look at it as this is only for the wealthy, right?
Right.
Only for anybody that owns land or houses or something to that extent. But how, or what advice I should say, would you give someone that's saying, hey, I just need somebody to take care of my mother, when I pass away or something? How would they go about doing that?
I
And you know what, also too, how much should people think this costs? Is this accessible to the average person, or is this something that unless you've got, $2 or $3 million, it isn't really worth your time?
Right.
I mean, it's very dependent on your situation. I mean, what I will tell a lot of people is, look, what the law says, if you die, Kimmy referenced this initially, if she died with nothing in place in her family situation, everything under an estate would go to her husband. And that's what the
Because
law.
they have children together. But if she had children with somebody else, it might be a different deal, right?
That's right.
If
That's
you
exactly.
go per stirpies, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So then it would be like half the spouse, half the kid. It changes depending on your family situation. But Dana, so like for you, if you had absolutely nothing in writing and we had to probate your estate when you passed away, everything would go to your daughter, which is what you want, right? I mean, you'd like to put it in some sort of
Her and NPR. I will, if I die without giving money to NPR, I will never be able to rest comfortably.
Yeah. Okay.
They get in my head with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the law would not give a gift to NPR. They would just give it, in an estate, it would all go to you. So sometimes for some people, like say my husband dies, I do want everything to go to my 2 kids, not quite yet, but they're not quite ready for it. But not a tragedy. If I died without a will, it would go to the people I wanted it to go to. So, maybe it's okay for some people. It's probably, not what an estate planning attorney is supposed to say, but for some people it works out okay. But really it's that power of attorney is so like key. If you're like, I just need somebody to take care of my mom. If she doesn't have a power of attorney and like you're on all of her accounts, you die, she has nobody who can access those to help pay her bills or check her into an assisted living facility or whatever it is. She's really stuck. And again, somebody would have to go to court if she's lost capacity. So that powers of attorneys sometimes can be the most important document.
Now, I wanted to ask you about that, like a power of attorney, what does that give the other person the authority to do versus a healthcare surrogate? What is a living will versus a will?
Yeah, so power of attorney is the financial fiduciary. It's anything you can sign and do that impacts property rights. It's kind of a broad way of putting it, but it could also be like if you lost capacity, Dana, and you needed somebody to go change your mailing address at the post office. That's somebody, an agent. Agent is what we call people nominated under a power of attorney. That's what your agent could do. Sign your tax return, sell your house.
Yeah.
Deal with.
Is that a durable? Is that what you mean by durable? Because you can limit the powers you give them, correct?
Yeah. So
you can have a springing. I don't want to get into law school, prep for the bar type of a thing, but it seems to me like you can. I think a lot of people get afraid when they think they're signing something to give somebody authority because they're like, I only want you to have this authority if I really am incapacitated. But the minute I'm back to capacity, I want my decision making back. I want you to be able to do certain things, but I want you to be able to wreck me because, I may not trust your judgment that much. I don't know. And then I wonder also what the check is on these people that we give this authority to.
Yeah, I mean, there's no power of attorney police out there. So you really have to trust. Again, you're only supposed to use it for the person's good. You're only supposed to reflect their planning. But, like I said a while ago, you can't unshoot the gun. If somebody misuses it, it's really hard to go back and undo sometimes what they've done. But to your point, Dana, we used to have, and that's really cool that you could pull out that springing power of attorney language, but that I'm impressed, but that's gone about 11 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it really is impressive. That's amazing, but we don't have that anymore. So
good.
Yeah, the legislature took
one less thing to remember.
Yeah, exactly. So when you sign a power of attorney, it's a live document. So what is important to understand, I guess, is that you're not giving up any of your rights by having signed it. You're just duplicating the rights. So, I can still do everything. I'm still the boss of my stuff. If my husband's named, he's only supposed to do what I want him to do with that. But there's nobody watching, and people have to accept that document. So you really have to make sure you trust people. And sometimes people just don't want to sign them because they don't have anybody they trust in their lives. And I understand that too.
Can they be limited in scope and duration?
Yeah, they can be both. So durable is I sign it. If I lose capacity, it's effective till the moment I die. But you can do a general power of attorney and that stops if you lose capacity. I don't really know why you would do that. And you can limit it. And again, if I don't put something in like that changing of your mailing address, example, it's not in your power of attorney, the person can't do it. So you
I
could
see.
very specifically give, like you could give your law partner some powers that are very limited to your business only. And that's a fine power of attorney that most
I'm
people
thinking about like, what if I want to go into space? You know, and I want to have, hey, don't laugh at me, Kia.
I'm
should.
not, I'm
You
sorry.
should.
I
The
tried
minute I get through astronaut training, I
It's like,
bounce. I'm out of here.
I
No,
listen,
think, I mean, just anything. But I mean, what I worry about is once I give it to somebody, how do I get it back? You
right.
know, are they going to fight me on whether I regain capacity? What if I just feel like I need to check myself into someplace and get my head straight and wellness, and I want to go all in, and I want to say I am not at my normal capacity. I want to give somebody control over my affairs, but I expect to regain capacity and come back stronger. How do I make sure I can do that?
Well, I mean, you only sign it when you have full capacity. So, you wouldn't necessarily do it when you have a lack. So, but if you can always change your mind. You're never locking yourself into this document. So if a year from now, I'm worried about my husband, I have to revoke it in writing, either by signing a new one or putting something saying I revoke this document, but it's as easy as that. And he can't use it anymore.
I have a question. So
Go
are
ahead.
you, because you're not filing the power of attorney with the court, right? So
Correct.
what's to keep them from just using the one you previously signed?
No one knows it's been revoked.
No one knows. Well, you got to disseminate the writing. So if I know that I have accounts at Truist and an investment account with Vanguard or whatever, I need to make sure they each have the document saying that's been revoked.
Okay.
Mm.
So anywhere they could
That
go
can get
use
so
it.
hairy.
Yeah.
It can get so hairy. It's
I don't
not,
like
it doesn't
it.
happen often. I know. I see that. I mean, people just don't, some people don't want to do it. And when you explain, look, the alternative is if you don't do it and you have a stroke or something happens to you, then everybody's going to have to go to court to oversee your assets. Some people say, great, that's fine with me. I want a judge overseeing the process. So,
But that's not really what happens though. The judge doesn't like oversee it. The judge appoints somebody to kind of be in control of it, right? And then it's up to somebody else to challenge whether that person's exercising appropriate control and bring it before the judge. The judge isn't going to fly spec everything that person does.
A lot. I mean, they have to do accountings that have to be approved by the judge, and they have to ask permission for a lot of things if they've got a guardianship going, which is what that would be, to get the equivalent powers. But to many people that, especially the ones like, I know you trust your daughter, so you would put her, with lots of don't ever misuse this, but there are honestly people out there who don't have a person in the world that they trust.
Yeah.
And so that's a fine option.
No, I trust her. I'm not so sure that I trust her trust of other people. And
Right.
so I think to myself, here's this young woman who's going to be a target for a lot of unsavory characters should she quickly come into a lot of money. So I kind of wanted to ask you about that. Like, are they called spendthrift trust, or how do you give money to somebody but make sure they don't have too much, too young of an age, all that? You help with that, correct?
I do. Yeah. Like for my own kids, they're 21 and 19, but if we go down in a plane, we're going to be on in a couple weeks, everything goes into trust for them with rules about what can be spent. My brother would oversee that money. And then we both said when each of them turned 35, they can become trustees of their own trusts.
Yeah.
Still not in their hands. And there are rules about what the money can be spent on. And if they haven't had kids, they're each other's police because they get to watch what each other is doing because they're the beneficiaries of each other's trust. If our son dies and there's money left, it would go to our daughter and vice versa.
Gotcha.
So it's not a super healthy dynamic, but it protects them from creditors. It might protect them from divorces. And if they are hemorrhaging out money to somebody, the other can say, you got to put that back in. So there's a little bit of protection from having done that. And then if they have super successful careers, we've also maybe kept some money off of their that tally for them when we calculate estate taxes one day. So
I see.
that's what we did.
It could get complex. I hear you.
It can get complex, right? Or some people just say, forget it. I know that that's protective. Just give them all the stuff and let them figure it out.
Is a healthcare surrogate the document that tells your healthcare providers what you want happening to your healthcare, how you want that directed, should you become incapacitated and unable to communicate that clearly to them?
Yeah, it can be. And actually, I didn't answer one of your questions before about what a living will is. So the living will is an advanced directive about end of life. So that would give your wishes if you can't communicate anymore and are actively dying from something incurable or you're brain dead. So that part of your healthcare directive could do that. But then the remainder of it really is saying, these are the people who get to make decisions for me if I can't. And these are the powers that they have. And that's kind of where you need to have communicated with those folks about what you want in certain situations, because if you're not actively dying or you're brain dead, it's really not something we can put in writing. It flips to the people to be your voice.
I got one more question, and then I want to turn it over to our panel and make sure they understand it. But how does it work legally at hospitals, hospice, these kind of places? Do they have legal departments? Because when I was trying to help this family, I felt so bad for the charge nurse, the director of nursing, the risk manager, all these people, because they're getting fervent pleas, from these people going, look, he wrote this, he doesn't want, they've been estranged for years, she's never cared for him. I mean, how could you let her come in here and make these decisions? And legally, from my understanding, because I had another lawyer involved in helping me with this, who's got a hell of a lot more experience in this than I do, but it sounded like the hospital and the hospice people got it right. As sad as it is, it sounds like they got it right. But what's your experience with them? And when you come up to a risk manager at the 11th hour in the hospital and you show them a document, how does that actually work?
I haven't had the situation, Dana, you're describing, because if there are clients, we typically have the document.
You already have it, yeah. Right. But I would imagine some people maybe come to you when it's too late too.
Yeah, they do
want you to work some miracles, and you're like,
yeah, that's a really hard conversation to say, I can't, I'm sorry. And we've definitely had people, bring people into the office, and we've had to say, I can't help you. And we've had people saying, mom wants to give everything to me, she's going to tell you that. And then you're like, your mother doesn't know where she is. You have hard conversations. Yeah.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Jana, when they come in, so y'all are having to judge whether they have capacity or not, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a checklist that you go through to determine whether they have capacity?
Yeah. How do you ascertain that?
Yeah. I mean, it's rough because you're right. I mean, I'm not a medical person, so I have to make my best judgment. I know what the level of capacity is that's required for a will. They need to be able to articulate what their assets are, who their family is, what their plan is. And you can have a moment of lucidity, and that's enough, even if they forget, the next day that they saw me. But a lot of people can't come in and articulate even kind of those basic things. And then
I'm sorry. Is that that's by statute? They have those lists of what they have to articulate?
I think it's case law. I'm not sure that's set out in statutes, but that is the standard. And then for powers of attorney, it's a little bit higher. You have to have a level of capacity that you need to execute a contract. So do you understand the terms? And so that's even harder.
I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a difference between those two.
Yeah, so that would be saying like, this is the contract, explain it back to me.
Yeah, that's a really good way of ascertaining. We'll say that, like, what is this? What do you think you're doing here? And what do you want to sign? And it's hard.
But again, if this is not done with legal effect, you can't just show up with a bunch of video or a bunch of handwriting and stuff and expect them to take that as a bona fide will or legal document.
Right. Right. We have some
That's what I think is so sad. I think people, it's almost like parole evidence, people are like, yeah, I know I signed that, but you don't know all this stuff they were telling me and all the emails and texts we had going on.
Right.
The law is looking at the contract that you entered into and your capacity to enter into it. So it's heartbreaking to me, because I think most people walking around feel like if there's plenty of evidence of what the person wanted, surely that's enough. People are reasonable, they'll do the right thing.
Yeah. I mean, and written, I don't want to be on life support, like things that are articulating what you want as far as healthcare decisions, that could be okay. That could be enforceable, but naming the people, you better have 2 witnesses or you're out of luck.
Kia, what are your final questions or thoughts today as we're wrapping up?
So I have like a 2-part, kind of going back to when Jana talked about durable power of attorney. Are those a part of, a core planning, part or core planning documents that people need to know about, if there are some? And then also, not necessarily, and I want to kind of make it a common core theme, talking about dementia when it comes to that, because that's a big deal with a lot of people. Alzheimer's, dementia, and everything we're talking about, it kind of falls in line to that. And then also, even going, this is the second part, what is the ladybird deed, and should we have one? Not talking about the first lady.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's a great question.
I don't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that in my second part of my 2-part answer to Kia, I will cover that. So yeah, power of attorney, definitely part of a, will or trust. There's, depend whatever your when I die documents are, and then your lifetime documents, power of attorney, and some sort of healthcare directive really are crucial and should be a part of everybody's estate planning packet or whatever they get from their attorney. So a ladybird deed is, it's a version of a life estate deed, which the traditional version of this, and Dana and Kimmy will remember this from law school, is I give you my house, but I hold back a life estate in the property. So that means I can live in the property. I'm responsible for the bills as long as I'm alive, but I really gave it to you already. So it's your property. So if I try to go sell it, you have to join with me in the sale. You get most of the money, because really, depending on my age, but you get most of the money. So that's a traditional life estate. So a ladybird deed is an enhanced life estate. And that is a type of deed where you say, look, I'm holding on to this property till the moment I die. But when I die, it's going to you. And so that does a few things. If you're applying like for Medicaid benefits, for nursing home, it's not considered a transfer. If I go to sell the property during my lifetime, I get to keep all the money. It's not your, there's a number of different reasons to do it. So anyway, it can be great. That's a long conversation about when it's appropriate and when it's not, but sometimes it's great.
So when we're dealing with dementia, would that be something that people should enter into the ladybird deed?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be fact specific, I guess, to what's going on with that person.
It's really,
I hear about it so much over the years, when friends of mine who lost one parent and the other parent remarries, and they will give that new spouse a life estate. And so whenever the remaining parent ultimately dies, they want to kick his wife or her husband out and sell that property and get right to it. And it could get real ugly. I guess that can all be dealt with in the instrument that makes that conveyance of the life estate and what the terms would be. I'm sure they don't have to leave that day, do they? Or do they? I don't know.
I guess it kind of depends on what the ownership situation is, but if the parents just get married, which sometimes happens, mom dies, dad's super lonely, he marries the first lady who showed up with a casserole kind of thing. They didn't do a prenup, she's got rights to that homestead.
That's her marital home.
Yeah, that's her marital home, and she can
kick her out of her marital home,
or she can get half of it. Just by, 5 minutes after they got married, if they didn't have a prenup. So Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So
Mhm.
you could handle that with a prenup, or you can handle it with a conveyance, I suppose.
Yeah, you could waive your homestead rights within a deed now too, but you got to do something affirmative.
See how complicated it is? You think you're just going through life, getting married, buying a
No.
house, having kids. Oh my gosh, you could just leave a wake of litigation and internecine personal conflicts in your wake. You just really could. It's so important to think about it. But hey, before we go, I want to talk about Brittany now. Do you ever have this come up where people are just going, this hooker is crazy. She should not have her own money. Somebody ought to step in and take care of her. I hate it because of the sexist nature of it. Nobody did this to Justin Bieber. Nobody did this to Martin Lawrence. It's infuriatingly offensive to me. But does this happen in real life very much, where someone just comes in and goes, this one's just got too many people in her ear. She's too immature, not enough life experience. She's got a lot of assets. Save her from herself.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think maybe the biggest parallel we have with people we see is some element of mental illness, which I think is probably present with her. I mean, I don't know a lot about the case. I've read some, but it's hard, and you have to talk to families about, I know you see a little bit of erratic behavior, but it's going to change. It's going to wax and wane. A guardianship, which is our conservatorship, is not a great tool for folks who are struggling with some sort of mental illness. Do you really want to do this? You're going to ruin your relationship, and it's going to be a bad fit for
and how do you get out of that once something like that happens? Because here I'm a medical malpractice lawyer, and I know this. You go get an expert who says this, I'll go get an expert who says this. Let's get real. So, I mean, it's who the judge is going to believe. And that's not an immutable fact. That is I mean, your mental health is all, that is not static. It changes. It's a very dynamic thing, given the people who are in your ear, your environment, what you're doing. You can step out of your ridiculous fame that you acquired at age 14 and start living a normal life. And you should be able to have full ability to make decisions for yourself. But how hard is something like that to get out of once a judge has determined that you're not acting in your own best interest?
Yeah, I mean, it's not awful, and we've had a variety of people do it. You do a suggestion of capacity, it's called, and you're right, you get a doctor to say this person's fine. And that's why it's a bad fit for mental illness, because sometimes you're fine, sometimes you're not. It's not like a dementia patient who's going to continue to deteriorate. So it's kind of it's locked in a little bit better. So it's hard, but it's rarity that you have somebody, and again, I'm not making a judgment. She may not have, but there may be some mental illness there, but to have somebody so successful and wealthy, but also where there's a concern about capacity, she is a real rare bird.
Yeah, it just offended me because so much of it was just situational. You remove her from that environment, she was probably going to level out just fine.
Great. Agreed. Yeah.
But anyway, it was so great to have you. Kimmy, do you have anything to end with before I talk about how special Jana is as a good friend to a good friend of ours?
No, I don't. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Great talking to you too, Kimmy.
What about you, Kia? Any parting thoughts or questions?
Thank you so much for, serving an underserved area of law. And we thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Kia. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Glad to have you in Florida, where we all come to live out our golden years. No, you are a good friend to our law partner, Betsy Brown, and she talks about you always. And the one thing I know about you more than I know about your elder law career is that you are somebody who will go to chemo with somebody and be there to ring the bell and be there whenever she needs you the most. You're an exceptionally good friend and good person, and your reputation precedes you in all those aspects. And it speaks so well of you. So thank you for loving somebody we love.
Yes, I appreciate it. I do love her. What's happening?
Well, it's easy to do. It's easy to do.
To help her. Yes.
She's a plus top-notch human. So, and we're talking about our law partner, Betsy Brown, who could not be here today. She's off doing something funner than this, if you could imagine. So thank you though, Jana. Thank you for being here. You're a treasure in our community, and you've helped so many people, and I know you'll continue to do that. You help our clients, and we're grateful to you for that. Thank you, Kimmy Hogan, for being with us again today. You asked such insightful questions, as you always do. Thank you, Kia, for your contribution. You're always thinking about things that the rest of us may not think about or experiencing, because we get so caught up in this little law bubble. You know, you need to have people who are not practicing lawyers remind you of how the real world works. And thank you for your contributions always, Kia. But this has been another wonderful episode of the Empower Hour, brought to you by the Empower Plant by Facing Brooks. And we will see you next Thursday at 4:30 Facebook Live. And you can catch this anywhere you catch your podcast, Amazon, Wondery, Spotify, wherever. Catch us whenever it's convenient for you. And we will see you next week. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.